Have you ever found yourself in an on-again, off-again relationship with dieting where you're starting a diet and then stopping and then starting another diet and stopping, and you find yourself in the same patterns, the same habits, the same routines? How can you break yourself from this cycle? In today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we sit down with registered dietitian Toni Marinucci to discuss this exact topic and what you can do to break free of this dieting cycle. We're going to cue the intro song and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, exercisers? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to ask you if you've ever struggled to apply the information that we talk about on the Exercise is Health podcast into your workouts on a consistent basis. This is something that we hear about so often from people, and because of that, we have created a brand new masterclass that you can attend for free to learn the systems that you need to have in place in order to be able to exercise on a consistent basis. You can learn more and get registered for the Fit and Healthy with Ease masterclass by going to fitandhealthywithease.com. There's a new one starting soon and space is limited. So make sure to go to fitandhealthywithease.com right now and get signed up. And without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. But we know that exercise is not the only piece of the puzzle, so today we are bringing you a phenomenal guest, Toni Marinucci. Toni Marinucci is a registered dietitian and business owner of Tips with Toni, who ironically teaches people how not to diet. Her team of RDs provide online nutrition coaching to help women break free of the all or nothing mindset and encourage balance instead. Toni's mission is to end restrictive diet culture by providing simple tips to healthy living while incorporating foods you love. She recently gave a TEDx talk and wrote a book titled Once Upon a Diet, where she discusses the parallels between dieting, dating, and romantic relationships, and how we treat them the same. Now, before we dive into our conversation with Toni, so many of you have taken the time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and we greatly appreciate this. So we want to highlight one that we received recently.
So this 5-star review says, "I love this podcast and can't wait to hear it every week. I thought I knew it all when it came to exercise, but they have taught me things I never knew. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Well, thank you for leaving this 5-star review. We are so excited that you are learning more about something you thought you knew it all about. And if you would like to leave us a rating and review, and maybe you'll even hear it here on the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review so that we can hear feedback from you. Also, you are about to hear one of our amazing interviews. If you're listening to this and think you could share something of value to our listeners, please apply to be a guest by going to exerciseishealthpodcast.com. Once you get there, just scroll down and you'll find the big purple button to apply.
Now, without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Toni Marinucci. Well, hey, Toni, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to our show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So tell me, you're a registered dietitian. How do you define diet? Because it's a word that's thrown out a whole bunch, but what does that actually mean in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like everyone to understand the original meaning of the word diet, which is just the way that we eat, and it's all based off of our cultural preferences, our likes, our dislikes, any allergies, intolerances, work-life balance, schedules, routines, what's important to us, our values. That's truly what a diet really should be, is just your way of eating. However, we live in a society where the word diet has got a really bad reputation, and rightfully so, because when people think of diets, they're usually put on one. It's very restrictive. They're limited in what they're allowed to have. It's very like a one-size-fits-all approach, or super rigid, but that's actually not what the term diet is. So when we work with clients one-on-one, we eventually get them to this place where, their diet. If their name is Susan, for example, at the end you have Susan's diet, basically just the way that she eats, nothing that she's really following, just like honoring her hunger, her fullness, her cravings, and eating balanced and in adherence to whatever her goals are.
That's really cool. I like that. So because the only named diet I've ever heard is like the Atkins diet, right? So that would only be like appropriate in your context for that one person. So what you're looking at is like you're talking about their lifestyle, like what's their work life? I'm sure like what's their exercise life? Like what is their stress like? And and so then you are building it for them, and then that becomes more or less like their eating plan, or like just how they go. Awesome. I love it.
Flexible eating plan. By the end, they pretty much know what their breakfast staples are, their lunch staples, their dinner staples, their snack staples, but then they also know how to navigate outside of that when they go to a restaurant or to a party or they're on vacation. It really is a lifestyle change, really, and I think a lot of people think of diet as like temporary and a quick fix, or you're on it and then you're off of it. But really, the way we define diet is helping you find what works best for you and something that you can follow in the long run.
I love that. That sustainability piece is huge, and the practical aspect of it as well. Like you're talking like, hey, if you're going to go to a party, if you're going to go out to eat, you have these guidelines that you can follow that still keep you within what is appropriate for you and your body. So along those lines, kind of like what are some of the bigger mistakes or challenges that you find people running into when they try to diet on their own, whether they are doing something that is, very restrictive and mainstream, or even if they're trying to follow maybe a more holistic approach?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that come to mind, but I think the most obvious one I'll just kind of share right off the bat is anything that eliminates an entire food group. So an entire macronutrient. Macronutrients, we have carbohydrates, protein, and fat. It's super trendy to like cut out all carbohydrates, but that's not going to be sustainable in the long run. And our body actually needs carbohydrates. The type of carbohydrates matter, but that doesn't mean we can never have refined carbs. It just means that we want to incorporate more of those complex carbohydrates, the ones that are higher in fiber most often. But with that said, I mean, if you look back to the 80s or 90s, fat was demonized and it was like super low fat. Now fat's in, right? But either way, you need all of them. Our bodies thrive, they depend on each other, they work together. So we do need all of them. So any diet that tells you to cut out an entire macronutrient, red flag. Anything that promises like quick, fast results, 30 pounds in 1 month, that's probably a lot of weight for most people, especially for women, depending on where your goals are at, because we know that when we lose weight really quickly, it often comes back and some. So that's usually like these promises of, oh, you're going to lose a ton of weight. And then I would say, more so, I think I actually just posted about this recently on my Instagram, and I was just talking about how a lot of people think that because they're losing weight, that means that it's working. But we really need to be assessing all these other parameters to make sure that is it really working for you? And, if you lose weight, can you keep it off? Can you sustain the things that you've been doing to get there? Right. And so the things that we can be looking at when trying a diet is making sure you're also looking at your energy levels, your bowel movements, your confidence, your relationship with food, your PRs in the gym. Like there's so many other things that I think we can be looking at to say, like, is it working with all those areas? Because those are the things that truly matter. And when you have a healthy relationship with food and a good relationship with fitness and movement, chances are your body will come to a place where, it feels good at it and you feel good in it at that place as well.
Yeah, I love that last point because it really speaks again to the sustainability aspect of it, right? Like you're not going to lose weight to the point where you weigh 0 pounds, right? So there's always going to be some stoppage. So you need to figure out a different metric to say, the way I'm eating is appropriate for my body. It can't just be a weight loss thing. So I love that you look at all those other factors. That's huge. What's the reception like with the people that you work with when you tell them, hey, like, we're not just going to be focusing on your weight loss with your diet. Like you might know that you want to lose weight. That may be your goal, but actually there are other things that are going to tell us we're going in the right direction. How do people normally respond to that?
I'm like smiling and laughing all at once right now because it's like clockwork. Everyone is like the same reaction and they're kind of like, yeah, okay. Like it's like they know that they're coming to us because it's like we're the last resort because they've done all the BS in the past and like they keep coming back to zero. So it's like they know that like I have this process, right? That me and my team of dietitians, like we have this process. And it's like they hear us talk about it, but it doesn't really like feel like it's gonna sink in quite yet. But then as they progress throughout the program and they start to feel incredible and their energy levels are up and their just mood is better, they then start to realize like, okay, I get what you're saying. It actually doesn't matter that much. And because we're assessing all these other things, they realize like, oh wow, like it really doesn't matter. I actually just had a call with someone who I've been working with for over a year, and she's been she lost some weight, gained some back ish on the scale if we look solely at the scale, but she's down 2 pant sizes. She never deadlifts less than like 100 pounds. Like she is just like, she's fitter than ever. She's running half marathons, like so the scale difference is 2 pounds, but the body composition is just like drastically different. And her mood and her energy and her relationship with food, she used to fight sugar cravings. She used to feel like she would like binge when nobody was watching. Like there's just so many things that have changed as a result of her healing her relationship with food and taking care of herself in a balanced and sustainable way. And if we only looked at the number on the scale, she would be disappointed, right? 2 pounds in a year, like seriously. But it's just incredible how much about everything else has changed. And then now she's a believer. It's like you have to do it and go through the process to really believe it. And then once you believe it, you're like, wow, why did I waste so much time, effort, and energy for so many years just trying to lose water weight? Because that's basically what it is.
Yeah. No, Toni, it's so interesting because I think people, nobody knows what they don't know.
Right.
I think that's what I'm trying to say. And so I guess what my point is like when we are being told by society and even from our medical professionals that like we need to be losing weight, that's what we believe is the most important thing. And so we don't know that we don't know that. That's what I'm trying to say. We don't know that the things that are actually most important to us are, like you're saying, our energy levels, how we're feeling throughout the day, our mood, and how we're able to move our body and how that feels and whatnot, and then how diet actually affects that. So I hear what you're saying, where it's like we get so locked in as like we're being told this is the most important thing. But then when we realize that there's this whole other world of living, there's this whole other kind of level of life where you can feel good all day, you can have good energy, you can have good mental clarity, you can, have your mood stabilized, like it feels good to move your body. Then we realize, oh yeah, that number on the scale, that's not nearly as important as I once thought it was. This is what really matters to me. So I love that. That's exactly what people are experiencing with you, because I'm sure that's just completely transformative for them in their life.
Yeah, now, it's very transformative for sure.
Now, you wrote a book that I need to learn more about. I need to learn more about it because I'm super interested. The title is incredibly intriguing, and it's How We Diet Like We Date. Now, I don't need to learn more about it because I need to date. I'm already married, but I need to learn more about it because what does this mean? How do we go about dieting like we date? Tell me.
Yeah. I will tell you, and I'll also tell you why, even if you're in a relationship, married, just partnered up, whatever, it can still be valuable to you. So awesome. I will explain, maybe not for you specifically, but maybe for the listeners. So the reason initially why I started writing it, I actually had the idea and the mindset around it when I was single. And I was reflecting on how here I am again. I go into these long-term relationships and then I'm single, and then I'm in another long-term relationship, and then I'm single, and then another long-term relationship, and I'm single. But I basically dated 5 versions of the same guy, just with a different name and a different face. Like I never learned any lessons, like just kept repeating these old patterns and just settling for less than I deserved and realizing it after the fact, like, wow, like I settled a lot. Now, I did the same thing in dieting and with my nutrition. However, I got to that lesson a little bit sooner, and that's why I went to school to become a registered dietitian. But with that said, I remember basically all these women kept coming into the program, and I kept noticing that before they started to work with us, they would basically jump from diet to diet, hoping each one was quote unquote like V1. And then they were frustrated when it didn't work. So I use the term once upon a diet because it's like they're going around like Cinderella stepsisters trying to jam their feet into that glass slipper that clearly wasn't a good fit for them, right? Because a lot of these diets are like very one size fits all. They work, but then they don't, but they were never meant to work. They were just not designed for you. So it's like, we're getting frustrated, but it's like, can't you see? It's just not for you. That's okay. Like, and then so like I was kind of getting frustrated and I was realizing, but then I was like, you know what? I do the same thing with relationships. Like, I am not exempt from this. And I used to do it with my nutrition as well. And so that one realization just opened up like Pandora's box to just so many other parallels between dieting, dating, and romantic relationships. So for those who are single, I like to say, like, we all love the honeymoon phase. Everything is super easy, but we have to realize that that's eventually going to end. And so for some people, they end up in these long-term relationships like myself, and I call myself a planter. Like, I stayed there and I kept trying to relive the honeymoon phase, but it just was not meant to go past that. And it was very clear. I just ignored all the red flags, but I just kept trying to make it work. Right. And then we have people who almost like don't even give the relationship a shot. It's like the second that something goes south or that there's something that is like maybe a little bit hard, they bounce, and they're called the bouncers. But in relationships, we do need, and you probably know, being in a long-term committed relationship, being married, that there is a little bit of adjustments and shifts, and it's not so black or white. You're going to have to put in some work if you like what you're getting, right? The results that you're getting, you're going to have to keep putting in that same amount of effort and work to get that in return, right? So that's what I think with dieting, so many people fail to realize is like, they'll go all in. It's like super great. And the second something fizzles, they either bounce or they stick to it, trying to like remake, they do Weight Watchers a bazillion times or whatever it is to like try to make it feel as good as it felt the first time, but it's just not going to work that way. You're going to have to do something different. So like there's lessons in that. So let's take the lessons, but let's stop trying to make it work when clearly it's not a good fit for us. So that's just like one, there's like a few parallels in there, but I decided to write a book because I was like, oh my God, there are so many ways in which we can talk about this.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I see it, not only within my own life, but with, the clients that we work with and the people that we speak with regularly. Just, we all fall into these patterns. We all fall into these habits and these routines in so many areas of our life. And I loved what you said about, I'm going to call it like the maintenance piece, where like we get a certain amount of progress made, we get to a certain result, whether it's the actual result that we want or not, but we start heading in that direction. And then we just feel like, well, because we're already there, it should just stay. Like it should just stay even without us having to put any effort in. And I love the parallel between that and what you're talking about with a relationship. It's like, if you don't continuously invest in your relationship, if you don't continuously invest in the person that you are trying to be in a relationship with, the idea that they're just going to stay or the relationship is just going to stay, it's not happening. It's not happening with your relationships. It's not happening with your health. It's not happening with your diet. So I love that you brought that up. How do you help people kind of navigate through that piece? Because that, to me, I feel like is one of the most difficult pieces to help people navigate through, because there's almost this idea that perpetuates our society of, well, if I don't do anything, I'm going to stay the same. And that doesn't happen. Like, well, if as long as I, don't do anything bad, it's not going to get worse. If I don't do anything good, it's not going to get better. But if I don't do anything at all, it's just going to stay the same. How do you help navigate that with people?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that we teach and that I teach and I write about in the book is all about being introspective and giving people tools to be reflective. Because I think so many people are just kind of going through the motions of life and never really sitting with themselves and asking them, like, do I even like this? Do I even like my life right now? Like, do I even like this partner anymore? Like, do I even like, So that comes from, obviously, I mean, everyone's method of being introspective is, individualized to them, but it can be something like journaling, meditating, taking time for you, dating yourself, even when you're in a relationship. I think that's super important to kind of remind yourself of what's important to me. What do I like? Therapy is super helpful. Really, and just like giving yourself that opportunity to check in and just ask yourself, like, Am I happy with this? In all relationships, there's ups and downs. How many ups are there? How many downs are they? Like, is this worth it to me? And I think that's a really good question to ask, because there does come a time, and I think in a lot of relationships, there's like these pivotal moments that it can go either way. And you have to decide, one, like, what do you want the outcome to be? And two, it would influence the relationship. So it's a little bit different. Well, actually, I guess you could say with your body as well. With relationships, like there's a partner involved. So you have to understand, you have to see, like, are they willing to do the work? But also too, I would say with our bodies, kind of going back to what you shared before, sometimes there is a maintenance mode, and sometimes you are like, okay, I got here, I lost the 20 pounds I wanted to lose, and now instead of you just being happy and learning how to, what are the efforts I need to keep in to maintain that weight, they then go to thinking, well, maybe I'll just lose 5 more. And I got wrapped up in this at one point in my journey. It was 5 more pounds turned into 5 more pounds, turned into 5 more pounds. And I forgot my own lesson and wording, which is basically, if you don't love the process, you're going to be forever disappointed with your progress. And I fell out of love with the process. I got so fixated on the end results that I was like just blind to all the warning signs and everything like that. And I think a lot of people fall victim to that. And it's really important to try not to, it's easier said than done, but try not to be in that mindset of I'll be happy when. Try to find ways to be happy now, happy within yourself, happy within your relationship, happy within your body. And you can still progress and make progress and have goals. But if you're fixated on, I'll be happy when I'm in a relationship, I'll be happy when I reach this number on the scale, you're going to miss out on life, and you're never going to feel like it's enough. It's never going to feel like fixed. You're always going to want more and more and more. And it's a rat race. It's really unsatisfying and it's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, I love that statement of, I'm going to paraphrase it, and I want you to iron it out for me. But it was, if you don't fall in love with the process, you'll be forever disappointed with your progress. Is that correct?
Yep.
That was exactly awesome. Right. That was great. That was so cool. Thank you for sharing that, because yeah, it's so true, right? Like, we think about these things that we want to accomplish within the next 90 days or the next 6 months or over the next year. But the reality is, knock on wood, for the majority of us, life is going to go on longer than that. And so the question is, all right, what do we do after that? And maybe we can see the next thing that we're trying to accomplish after that. Maybe we know it's just another stepping stone. But the fact of the matter is, whatever it is beyond that, in order to get to that next thing, or in order to do that next thing, that process is so huge. That process is always going to be there in one form or another. So I love that statement. I love that statement. If we fail to fall in love with the process, we'll be forever disappointed by our progress.
Yes.
That's awesome. Okay. So how do you recommend that people actually approach their diet or approach going on a diet? Like, what are some steps that they could follow in order to do this?
It's a great question. So I don't technically recommend going on a diet, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I rather you create your own through what you're currently doing. However, I do share this in the book, like sometimes we need to go through it to get the lesson, and that's fine. So I can warn you about, like, I could warn you about the bad boy, but if you decide to date him anyway and get the same lesson, fine, because you had to feel it, so like I can warn you about keto, I can warn you about going on this and that, whatever, but if you need to go through it to get the lesson, that's fine. With that said, make sure you ask the right questions after. What lessons did I learn from this? What did I like? What didn't I like? And make sure you're being introspective. With that said, if you want to fast forward that I don't want to call it a waste of time, as long as it taught you something, but if you want to fast forward that part, and rather than be on a diet, I suggest kind of creating your own through, one, we need to build awareness. So tracking your food, it doesn't have to be like calories or macros or anything too invasive. It could be as simple as taking photos of your food, getting pen and paper, writing in the note section of your phone, just even doing like a backlog of what do I usually have for breakfast? What do I usually have for lunch? What do I have for dinner? Do I even eat breakfast? Stuff like that. And just become really mindful of things even outside of nutrition, like hydration and movement and sleep, because these are all incredibly important with a healthy lifestyle. And start small. Start with, getting more quality sleep. Try that, start with getting a little bit more movement. Maybe you're too obsessed with movement. Maybe you need to put in some rest days and know that it's okay to take your rest. When it comes to your nutrition, since we're speaking specifically about diet, like I said, we want all of those macronutrients present. And I think it's super powerful when you eat balanced meals. So when each of your meals, ask yourself, like, is there a protein present here? Is there a complex carbohydrate present here? Or is there a healthy fat present here? And is there some sort of color like a fruit or a vegetable?
Mhm.
If you can really practice that, eventually taking what you're currently eating and making small tweaks to make it a little bit more nutritious and a little bit more wholesome and filling. I think so many people are afraid of overeating, but because they're afraid of overeating, they undereat and then overeat and some. Right. So
Sure.
if we can practice just eating like 3 balanced meals a day to start, and then fill in snacks if you need them, that's going to be a really great start, because you're going to have more energy. You're going to probably have more regular bowel movements. You're just going to feel just in a better mood overall. If you exercise, you'll probably feel like your energy is up in your workouts as well, your recovery. It's a process, right? So when we work with someone, it's a 6-month program minimum.
Awesome.
And it's because we're going through that stuff like step by step and week by week and month by month. And most people go into something all in and then burn out.
Sure.
We go in like you're all in the process, but you're flexible in your approach, right? So your small changes, little changes, build, and stop relying on motivation. We rely on momentum, because when you're making progress. I just listened to a podcast with Tony Robbins, and he's like, everybody just wants progress. When you're happy when you're making progress, and it's true. So it's like, as long as you know you're going somewhere, you're going to keep going. But if you feel like there's no point and you're at a dead end, you're going to fail. You're going to quit. You're going to stop.
Exactly.
So we just really rely on those little small changes to build over time. And then in 6 months goes by and you look back and you're like, wow, I climbed a mountain and I didn't even feel like I was going uphill.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I love that approach. So how can people, one, work with you? Because you work with people online. Yes. You and your team.
Yeah.
So
online nutrition coaching.
Awesome. So how can people connect with you and work with you?
Go to tipswithtoni.com/coaching. So Toni with an I, tipswithtoni.com/coaching.
Yes. Right on. Awesome. And then how can people get a copy of your book?
Amazon. So it's on Amazon. There's an ebook version, audio version, which is in my voice, and also the paperback.
Right on.
It's a quick, easy read. The feedback has been incredible. And I would say most of the people tell me they finished it in like a day or 2 days. And those are for people who aren't even avid readers.
Amazing.
So it's a quick and easy read. It's a good book. Thank you so much for having me.
That's always great feedback, because you know it's being absorbed then. That's awesome.
Yes.
And then you're fairly active on Instagram?
Yep, that's my main platform, I would say. So
Perfect.
Instagram at tips_with_Toni with an I. And I also have my own podcast as well, the Tips with Toni podcast.
Oh, Tips with Toni podcast. All right, fantastic. Definitely check that out. Okay, so tipswithtoni.com. Coaching is there. You can get the book on Amazon. Follow you on Instagram. Check out your podcast. That's amazing. Anything else that you'd like to leave our listeners with about what they should be thinking about from a nutrition perspective, from a diet perspective?
I would say your body does know you. You just have to listen to it. So just lean into paying attention to what your body wants and needs, and practice honoring that, and just be patient throughout the process. And eventually you'll feel really good that you let go of the following a diet and instead created your own.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, Toni, the question that we like wrapping up with for all of our guests is, what is your definition of health?
Love this question. My definition of health is your physical health and your mental health. I think people automatically associate health with just like aesthetics and maybe physically, but I truly believe that if one is sacrificing the other, then you're not truly healthy. And I believe that because for many years, I sacrificed my mental health just to look a certain way, and it was miserable, absolutely miserable. And I've learned that I actually can be both physically healthy and mentally healthy together. And that's the magic, that's the beauty in it. And that's truly just, now you can live a quality, rich life and really do whatever it is that you want to do. And so when you can marry those two, and it's really, really, really incredible.
I love that. It's amazing. Well, Toni, thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise, your stories with us. This was fantastic, super fascinating, and really, really important work that you're doing. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that finds themselves going on an on-again, off-again diet plan, jumping from one diet to the next, always looking for that next best thing, but never fully finding the thing that actually works for them? Share this episode with them so they can learn about Toni's approach and see if working with her and her team may be the next best step for them. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this episode when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So what did you think about that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you would like to learn how to apply the information that we talk about every single week on the Exercises Health podcast and get your workouts in consistently while doing so, then you need to check out the Fit and Healthy with Ease Masterclass. You can learn more and get registered by going to fitandhealthywithease.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.